So I made a prediction a few weeks ago that Dune 84 would be reassessed, and a snarky comment left on one of my Dune videos was, "No, that's not happening. You're making stuff up. You're lying." Well, I'm not lying, and guess what? Reassessments are happening, and we're gonna key in on one of them by Breakfast All Day, which essentially was the former film critics for the Young Turks. The usual troika is Matt, Alonso, and Christie, though sometimes Ben comes along too, but he's been more rare. Matt, I think, is probably the strongest of them. I think Alonso and Chrissy are fine, but they have a lot of problems. Alonso is gay and very liberal. He makes no apologies for that. He knows foreign films and he knows film history a little bit, but he has a lot of gaps in his film education. Christie's probably the weakest. She really doesn't know that much. She knows mostly American stuff, and she's a very partisan feminist. She makes no secret of that. She makes very clear she's very biased in terms of women's pictures, Paul Thomas Anderson, that kind of thing. So we're going to hear them speak, and interestingly, I actually predicted they would be very harsh. And they are critical of it, but actually they ended up giving it a low score, but still fairly high when you think about how just this was almost universally trashed. Really, there were only like 2 or 3 critics who really stood up for it. The vast majority of critics really, really hated it, and the Rotten Tomatoes score officially is at apparently in the 40s, which, if you've seen the film, is pretty shocking because whatever you think about it, it's not incompetent. It is, however, pretty all over the place. I myself more and more like it. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 to 8.5 out of 10. There's a lot of factors in terms of assessing Dune 84. So let's hear them speak and respond.
And get what he was going for with the weirdness. It's meant to be weird. It's meant to be funny. Like Sting is giving a funny performance.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I think people didn't know what to make of it because it's so singular. And like in time, as he made more movies, you can look back on this and see how it fits in his filmography.
You have that big fish alien whose mouth is very, anatomical, let's say, with the pink smoke coming out of it.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he's like trying to turn. I still haven't seen the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, but this is that level of like, we're turning this into something visionary, and this is not going to be your regular sort of space opera, but and I think the 2021 version is trying to sort of like do that, but in the opposite direction, like as subdued as possible, as monochromatically as possible, and not as sort of trippy and psychedelic, or not even psychedelic, but hallucinogenic.
Well, I want to say 2 things. I've read the books, not all of them. I'm still working through Children of Dune, but I read the first one and the second one, Dune Messiah. I think what they're getting wrong is they think that this is really goofy and funny and silly. If they knew the mythology and understood it better, it does appear very wacky and fantastic, but when it's described contextually in the book, it makes a lot of sense. It's a lot darker in the book, so it comes off pretty silly and stupid, even the way Lynch did it, because it's another universe, right? It's a fictional mythology in a fictional universe. It's actually set in a basically alternate future where, again, the spice is very, very central to this economy and to the politics. But it is actually a fairly grounded universe. I think, again, part of it is the technology of the time. They didn't have the special effects to make it more seamless. Another is they did exaggerate a little bit certain aspects with the costumes and the settings. But, again, altogether, Lynch wasn't distorting most of what is in the book. He did change a ton of details, and there is one major thing that he changed from the books, which is the technology. The Atreides do not have this weird sound technology in the books, but he used that to get through a lot of the plot. So if you actually go through the movie carefully, actually it does correspond to a lot that's in the book in terms of the plot, even symbols. But again, I guess the way Frank Herbert did it, it came off really, really silly, but if you read it in the book, it comes off as fairly serious. And the Denis version, I think, tried to understand that, but I think it went too far. It's way too serious. But it's good that they took it that way, that it's kind of silly but fun, but that's not really the intention, and I don't think that's what Lynch wanted, because he had a lot of horror images. This is a very adult movie. Even though it sounds silly about, a boy and a worm, it does have a much deeper layer and much more serious subtext. But if you just want to look at it from the kind of surface level, it's just a weird, wacky, epic adventure movie, that's fine, but it is much deeper, and I think Lynch Again, he didn't always get it right, but he did try to balance the serious with the silliness. But as I said, this thing is going to be reassessed. They gave this both 7 out of 10. Again, my score is a little bit higher, but that's much higher than the 40s. And again, I've already done Ebert and Siskel. They just dismissed it out of hand. They just thought it was just stupid. It just was pointless. So we're definitely going to keep talking about the Lynch version for quite a while. The review was mostly positive. I still think they didn't understand either the film or the book. That there you go. Dune is a very complex mythology. You got to spend a little bit of time with it to master it. But so at least one commenter on my channel is wrong. We are going to be reassessing Dune 84. Good or bad, I'd highly recommend it. But again, it is not for everybody. It is probably going to get a mixed reaction from whoever sees it, as it should. It's a very divisive picture. Thanks for listening.